One. Hey everyone, and welcome back to my virtual classroom. I'm your host, Dr. Olmsted. Now, this video is all about how to write a quote-unquote proper college historical essay. Now, what you're faced with is one of these section assignments right now. And this is what's called a primary source section assignment. In other words, you are going to read primary sources. I put together a packet of reading for you, and these are sources that are written in that era by people who were living during the events in question. That's what primary sources are. They can be newspapers, they can be letters, they can be propaganda, they can be cartoons. And these are documents that are what historians use to base their arguments on. Or, in other words, how to recreate and understand why and how something happened. Now, you may be more familiar with the term research paper. Now, this, for all intent and purposes, is like a research paper. Other than you are not doing any research. I am providing the research for you. What you need to do is read the documents and then write your essay. Now, if you look at the assignment sheet, there are 5 pages on there, and they spell out in great detail what I'm looking for. Page 1 has the technical information. The first thing it has, of course, is the prompt. So you need to read through the prompt very carefully, very closely, and determine what I'm asking. If you have questions, reach out to me, ask me. I'll be happy to clarify. Now below that kind of box I have on my first page, then I have the technical information. For example, this must be a 3 to 5 page paper. It must be written in double space, Times New Roman, 12-point font, 1-inch margins. Now these are standard operating procedures. But please make sure you check your settings on either your Word doc or your Google Doc or whatever if you're using Pages. Make sure you check your margins. Because again, that would be unfair if I'm judging your 3-page paper against someone else's 3-page paper and your margins are at 1.5 inches, you didn't write as much. I'm looking for a full, at least 3-page paper. And again, double space, Times New Roman, 12-point font, 1-inch standard margins. In addition, because I want to keep this fair and equal, and I do want at least 3 full written pages, I do not want a header. Now what happens is students, for good reasons sometimes, and sometimes just because they want to waste space, they will create the header on the first page that's their name, my name, the course number, the class name, their dog's name, their mother's maiden name, and they double space it all, and by the time they're done with that, we have a half a page of header. That's just wasted space. Now, there is a technical way that you should do a title page, but honestly guys, I don't care. I don't care how your title page looks. If you want to make it decorative with cool looking images, fine, fantastic. But what I want is the title and your name. And sure, the date, why not? The point of this, though, is not that I want a cool looking stylized title page. I want you to have one because what I don't want is you to waste space on the first page of your writing. So think of the title page as page 0, then I want a full 3 to 5 pages written of your actual essay in answer to the prompt. Okay, so you got that part. That's page 1 of the document. Page 2 talks about the ways in which you cite documents. Again, part of this assignment is that you must quote and or paraphrase the primary source readings. Now, be very clear here. There is no outside research required. I don't want outside research. Do not go to the internet. You should be using the readings I provided, the primary source readings. You can use lecture notes and the e-textbook. But again, as it says on that page, you should not quote from my lectures. You should not quote from the textbook. Save your quotes for the primary sources. Use the textbook or my lecture notes as context, as a way to frame and explain those quotes. So, I do require, and again, this is partly because I'm a historian that I believe in using footnotes versus MLA citation. So what I'm technically using is Chicago or Turabian style of formatting or citations. And that requires a footnote. It's very simple to do. I explain it on page 2. All you have to do is at the end of the sentence in which the quote appears. In Word or Google, just go to Insert, Footnote. And it will create the little superscript number, and it'll drop you down the bottom of the page where you can put the title of the source and the page number you got it from. That's all I need. I'm not going to dock you points if your format is not exactly precise with the right commas and periods and semicolons and quotation marks. The point is, I want to be able to find where you got your source. And I want it in a footnote because I find MLA parenthetical citations very distracting. It's also not what historians use. And again, I explain on page 2. I also explain on page 2 what is a quote versus what is a proper paraphrase versus what is plagiarism. Remember, this is being turned into turnitin.com. I am checking for plagiarism, and if you plagiarize, especially intentionally, it will result in a failing grade. Now, page 3 talks about the other options, which include a digital story, if that is an option for you. Page 4 is the rubric. Pay close attention to that. I explain in great detail exactly what I'm looking for an A paper, a B paper, a C paper, a D paper, a failing paper. And basically it has to do with, number 1, do you have cleanly written essay? So have you proofed it? Do you have a good grammatical flow? That's one thing. And again, that varies in degrees from A, B, C, D, or F. You must have a solid thesis statement. And we'll talk about thesis statements in a minute. You must also have evidence. Again, you should have, for an A paper, you need 2 to 3 quotes per body paragraph. For a B paper, it's 1 to 2 quotes per body paragraph. For a C paper, you have 0 to 1 quotes per body paragraph. And of course, I do in the first page specify you need 4 or 6 quotes total. Now, I'm going to spend a lot of time the rest of this video talking about how to set up your essays. Because what I find is students who do their first introduction paragraph well tend to do well the rest of the paper. Because if you do your introduction properly, you have outlined and set up your entire essay where you can just fill in the blank. And then page 5 of the assignment sheet, I'll get to the very end of this talk. It's also part of this PowerPoint presentation. And it's an outline of line by line what your essay should look like. And I'll get to that once I get to that point. So the first thing you need is an introduction. Now, your introduction should not start with some foo-foo-y thing. It should also not just start with the word I. In fact, I don't really ever want you to use first person in your writing. In historical writing, you generally don't use I or me or we. So the first thing you need is what's called context. You need to set up your prompt, set up your essay, explain to the reader, in this case me, what it is you're going to be talking about. Now let me give you an example of what context is. If you've ever seen Star Wars, the opening crawl is a great example of what context is. It provides pertinent information to the viewer or the reader, in this case the viewer for watching the movie, of what is going on. So if we went into the original Star Wars, which is episode 4, and had no idea the first scene was some random woman handing a bunch of something, don't know, computer USB-ish thing to this robot, we would be lost. And so the opening crawl sets up the opening scene saying, hey, there's a rebellion faced against the Empire and they've stolen the plans for the Death Star. And Princess Leia must now smuggle these plans out to the Resistance. Well, then it makes a little more sense. Okay, so we have a princess who is giving this plans now presumably to this droid who can escape and get the plans to the Resistance, and that sets up the entire movie. If you haven't watched Star Wars, think of things like serial shows on television, whether it's like Arrow or The Flash on CW, or it's like NCIS, or even some CSI episodes, where the first scene is previously on Flash, previously on NCIS, where they flash back 3 seasons to this random character that appeared for 5 minutes, but you don't remember because that was 3 seasons ago, but suddenly they're going to use that character today. And so therefore you need to flash back to what went on so you can have context to understand why this character is important to today's episode. It's setting up today's story. You need to do the same thing for your essays. So the first part of your opening paragraph, this is about 3, 4, maybe 5 sentences. You need to go back in history about 20, 30 years, sometimes 50 years, depending on how old we are. You don't go back to the beginning of time. You don't start necessarily with Columbus. You go back about 20 to 40 years, and you explain what is setting up what's going on. So, for example, if this is an essay about the Civil War, we don't need to go back to Columbus. We should go back to, maybe the framing of our Constitution, which is about 70 years beforehand. We should talk about the institution of enslavement in the South and the inability to compromise. Okay, that's setting up the prompt. If the topic is the civil rights movement in the 1950s, well, maybe we should go back to the 1940s and talk about how World War II has radicalized African Americans to be more, indignant in standing up for their rights. Now, I'll give you a couple examples here. So this is the definition, right? And again, this is the too long didn't read version. It's the background of the prompt. And again, this PowerPoint will be posted on Blackboard. You can view it later in its extended form. I want to give you the quick overview of it. So here's some examples here. From the beginning of time, humans have wanted to increase their power. Columbus did it, and so did the Puritans. Okay, that's what we call vague, inefficient, ineffective, crappy context. It tells me nothing of the prompt. In fact, you jump from Christopher Columbus in 1492 to the Puritans in 1620. I have no idea what the topic is. Next one. Brigham Young led the Mormons to Utah. Manifest destiny was increasing. Kansas-Nebraska Act created. People moved west. Railroad built. Lewis and Clark. Gold? Slavery? Compromises. Wow. Okay, that's what we call word vomit. Now, if you've looked at my lecture, you see a lot of key terms. This is a bunch of word vomit of my key terms that, yes, those are all important concepts, but none of them are explained. I have no idea what any of this actually has to do with the actual topic. You need to explain these key terms in order to make them work. And again, you don't need that many. Number 3, as the population of the United States began to grow in the late 1700s, finally, a time period, a date. That's important. People began to seek better lives, wealth, and more fertile lands west of the Mississippi. Where? So we're talking about apparently westward expansion here. When Louisiana Territory was purchased from France, it gave America the land it dreamed of. Lewis and Clark, along with early pioneers, began exploring that land, settling the territory. People soon began to follow these pioneers, traveling westward and making the West an important and also controversial addition to the United States. I have a who, what, where, when, why, and how. Then I can easily then transition to my thesis statement. Before I get there, though, let me give you the actual prompt for this, by the way, because again, good context should kind of give me an idea what the prompt is about, and apparently this is about westward expansion. So, actual essay prompt, explain the causes and consequences of territorial expansion in the United States from 1785 to 1855. Once again, you should not tell me about Christopher Columbus if you're telling me about the 19th century here. Should make sense. So that's context. Again, 3 to 4, maybe 5 sentences that gives me the who, what, where, when, why background of the prompt. that sets up and then transitions to your thesis statement. Again, go back about 30, again, 20, 30, 50 year max, usually. Now, then we will transition to your thesis statement. And this is one of the most important elements of your essay. It's one of the reasons why it's such an important part of the rubric. Because if you write a good thesis statement, number one, it's a great skill to learn. It streamlines, it argues your paper, it tells the reader what you're talking about and how you'll be discussing it. Now, in its basic essence, a thesis is an argument. That's what it is. So the first thing, you must have a historically defensible argument. You cannot make a thesis statement that an argument that says pigs can fly. Well, that's not historically defensible. You can't start out with a conspiracy theory necessarily saying, well, I think it was aliens that built the pyramids. Now again, that's fun to talk about, but we're not going to write that historically because there's no historical evidence to base this on. So again, stay away from these conspiracy theory ideas here. But beyond historically defensible, a thesis argument must also be what we call complex. In other words, it must have reasons. So for instance, I often assign a paper in 1301 that is, should the Cherokee have been removed from their land or not? It's a very simple prompt question. Now, understanding most of you all say, well, of course not, that's just wrong and stupid. Agreed. But when you read the documents I provide, you see that there was a lot of disagreements between the Cherokees themselves even and the U.S. government. And you're reading a bunch of these letters, documents written back and forth between the Cherokee and the U.S. government in the years leading up to the Trail of Tears, not knowing necessarily that the Trail of Tears is going to happen. Remember, that was not a foregone conclusion. And therefore, your thesis statement needs to be either the Cherokee Indians should have been removed or the Cherokee Indians should not have been removed. Fair enough. But that's not enough. That's just a statement. That is an argumentative statement. But as I said, a thesis must be complex. Therefore, a thesis statement needs reasons or categories that will then become your body paragraphs. So what you need to do then is to create a statement that says the Cherokee Indians either should have or should not have been removed. So pick one, just pick one side. So we're going to go with they should not have been removed for a minute. So the Cherokee Indians should not have been removed because of A, B, and C, where A, B, and C are your reasons of why they should not have been removed. Now these reasons should not be extremely detailed, right? These are supposed to be general themes. For instance, you could say, because the law said the land was theirs. Again, it's vague enough where you can now write and elaborate on a whole paragraph of information regarding the law, maybe perhaps treaties. And so what those A, B, and C categories are is they represent the complex thesis. The Cherokee Indians should have not been removed or should have been removed because of A, B, and C. A then becomes your first body paragraph. B is your second body paragraph. C is your third body paragraph, if needed. In addition, that clause that you use, because I said of the laws that protected the land. Well, that phrase, laws that protect the land, is a phrase in your thesis statement. That phrase should then be extended to a full sentence to become the topic sentence of your first body paragraph. And again, your body paragraph should flow in the same order as your thesis categories. A, B, C, you would not write them B, C, A. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Again, in history, we kind of have like three major types of essays we write. We have comparison papers, we have cause and effect papers, and we have continuity and change papers. So I'm going to present you with one example right now, which is the comparison paper. Now, I'm going to, again, post this PowerPoint on Blackboard that will have the full definitions of comparison, continuity and change, and compare and contrast. And cause and effect, sorry. And so I'm going over one of them. The other two will be online so you can view how to write a thesis. So the first thing you must figure out is what kind of essay are we writing? In this case, we're going to do a comparison paper. Now, please note, you want to find the debatable issue. Now, if it's going back to my Cherokee example, with the Cherokee, I'm giving you the debatable issue. It's very simple. Should they have been removed or not? That is your debatable issue. However, if I don't give it to you so clearly, which can happen, you want to try to figure out what is the historically defensible error? What is the debatable issue? And in history, you want to, quote unquote, live in the gray. In other words, you can't simply say the Holocaust was bad. Well, we know that. But find areas that can be debated. Such as in the Cherokee case, find an area like, ooh, were all the Cherokee people on board with this? Were all the U.S. government against them? Find the debatable issue. Find the debate within the documents. So the first thing you have to do is identify it. So this is a sample problem or a sample prompt here. Prompt was analyze the extent to which New England and Chesapeake colonies differed. Okay, so the debatable issue is which is more important here or more significant, the similarities or the differences. Okay, let me be very clear. This is not rocket science. This is not brain surgery. I'm not looking for you to do a bunch of research. Remember, no outside research needed. The first thing you need to do, identify your position. Brainstorm. Make a freaking list of what you know about the topic. So read the documents and then just make a list of what you know. If what you identify the most, going back to my Cherokee idea, is that the majority of people seem to be against removal, then use that one. In this case, similarities and differences between the two colonies, make a list of similarities and differences. If your similarity list has 2 things and differences have 10, go with differences, or vice versa. Go with what you know. I'm not looking for you to reinvent the wheel here. So, state your position. Again, this is your blanket argumentative statement. Either the similarities between the colonies were more significant than the differences, or the differences were more significant than the similarities. Pick your side. Now, this is your blanket argumentative statement. Then you need to what's called qualify or provide your rationale. You need to provide reasons. The similarities between the colonies were more significant than the differences because their shared belief in representative government and economic reliance on Britain provided a unified basis for eventual rebellion. So this person has 2 body paragraphs set up here. Shared belief in representative government, economic reliance on Britain. Or, vice versa, the differences were more significant than similarities because the different environments and motivations for settling led to fundamental differences in economic and labor struggles. Therefore, eventual differences and eventual conflict between the regions. Now, in a proper thesis statement, you pick one of those 2. This will get you the points that you need. Now, if you want to make it even better, what you do is you create what's called a qualification statement. Take the side you're not going to use and acknowledge the counter-argument. So this person went on and gave us an elaborate statement, which is awesome, that says, although their shared belief in representative government and mutual economic reliance led to eventual rebellion, the differences were more important than the similarities because the different environments and motivations for settling led to fundamental differences in economic and labor structures, and thus a civil war between the regions. Again, this is what's called a really good thesis. So again, if you go back to my Cherokee example, you can acknowledge, although it was legally wrong to take the land from them, it was better they were removed because of A, B, and C. Then, last step is you should polish your thesis. You should take out some of the filler words and streamline it a bit more. Again, this is what's called editing. This is called proofreading. And then you're going to repeat then for a cause and effect or continuing change. It's the same pattern over and over. Again, look at Blackboard, see how it is the rest of the PowerPoint. I'm going to skip over this really quick. And it gets the same 7 steps. And jump to this last page. And again, this page you see right now, the slide, is the same page you'll see on page 5 of the assignment sheet. This is a line-by-line, paragraph-by-paragraph outline. of what I'm looking for in your essay, in your 3 to 5 page essay. So intro paragraph, introduction paragraph. Your intro paragraph should be no more than about half a page, maybe 2/3 of a page long. You should provide the background of the prompt. This is usually 3 to 5 sentences, the who, what, where, when, why. Again, context. And then transition to your thesis argument. That is both a historically defensible statement and 2 to 3 reasons, topics, themes, categories. Your first body paragraph should start with a topic sentence that elaborates on the first point or reason of your thesis statement. You should follow that with a direct historical example or a specific historical example. This should be a concrete example. Most often, this should be a direct quote that is then cited. But then, please note, you need to lead into the quote. Explain to me who's talking. Don't just say, start with a quote, but say, Thomas Jefferson wrote, quote, and then say it. And then at the end of it, you should put your footnote and cite it. And then after that, so you need to explain it. Quotes are not self-sufficient in and of themselves. They need to be explained, analyzed, and detailed. And then, because if you want a paper, I said you need 2 to 3 quotes per body paragraph, you should have a second quote, and then explain it. And then kind of encapsulate in one sentence, summarize and tie it back to your thesis statement, why this paragraph matters to your overall argument. And then second body paragraph, do the same thing. Take your second thesis point, make it a full topic sentence, provide a historical example, quote, cite it, explain it, quote, cite it, explain it. And then repeat for body paragraph 3 if you need it, or body paragraph 4 if you need it for that matter. And then in your conclusion, you should restate your argument using different words. Because what happens often is students tend to start writing and their thesis statement is not fully formed in their introduction. Like they just don't quite get it right. They figure it out better in their conclusions. And then also in your conclusion, you should kind of mention the other side. If you made the comparison, offer the contrast. Kind of provide the counter argument at times and or try to tie it to current events. Tie it to why this topic still matters today. Now, I hope this video helped. I want to make sure you have all the information. Again, my rubric is very clear. I provided you this essay format outline overview. I provided the PowerPoint on how to write thesis statements and what context is. These are the things I'm looking for. The only other thing I'm looking for beyond this is good grammar. Things like indentation of the paragraphs. Things like proper capitalization of nouns. I've noticed a very bad trend lately where students do not capitalize certain proper nouns, like the terms African Americans or Native Americans or Cherokee or North Dakota. They tend not to capitalize those things. Or they tend to capitalize random words like the word the that's in the middle of a sentence. Again, proper grammar. And again, if this was a one-time thing in class, no, I'm not a big stickler on grammar. But because I'm giving you more than a week to do this, I do expect you to read through and kind of proofread your essays. I'm looking for a cleanly written prose, cleanly written essay. So if you have any questions, again, reach out to me, let me know. Otherwise, good luck. And I look forward to reading your essays. Take care. Until next time, bye-bye.